Darkness falls across the land. Creatures crawl in search of blood.
Nobody knocks off an old man in my neighborhood.
Hello there. Welcome to my review of episode 7 of Eerie, Indiana, Heart on a Chain. Marshall doesn't bury the lead in his opening narration, informing us that this episode is going to deal with death.
Death isn't exactly something I like to think about. But ever since I lost my goldfish, Nosferatu, in 2nd grade, I knew death was a part of life, and part of growing up.
We see Marshall with Melanie Monroe, a new girl in town, who also happens to be Marshall's first kiss, which happens to occur in a cemetery.
It should come as no surprise that the first time I ever really kissed Melanie Monroe, we were in the Eerie cemetery. Too bad we weren't alone.
We then flash back a few months to when he first met Melanie and made a new friend in none other than Devon Wild, played by Corey Danziger, who appeared in Joe Dante's The Burbs as Tom Hanks's son.
Last week, when I was up on the roof with my telescope, I saw them in their backyard.
What were they doing, honey?
Digging.
Kind of like grave diggers?
Maybe.
He's quickly established as having a reckless attitude. Before the teacher informs them, Melanie will be joining the class and has a heart condition, meaning she can't take too much excitement. Now, I'm pretty sure even as a kid, I was able to work out what those two pieces of information about two separate characters are going to add up to. Melanie is introduced, and Marshall clearly has a thing for her, but so does Devon.
I saw it first. No, I didn't.
Melanie is played by Danielle Harris, who had already established her own horror credentials in Halloween 4 and 5 by the time this episode was made. The two boys fight over her and show off to impress her, while Simon doesn't understand what all the fuss is about. Marshall is lovesick and gets some advice from Elvis about buying her a gift.
Want my advice, little boy? Buy her something tender and nice.
Which he does, but Devon's also bought her a gift. On their way home, Devon is hit by a van and dies in the hospital, while the oblivious Melanie opens the boy's gifts. Marshall a joke heart, and Devon a heart locket, with a note that says "My heart belongs to you," which is literally true, as Melanie is rushed to the hospital to receive the heart transplant she desperately needed. Devon's heart. With her new heart, Marshall notices she is becoming more and more like Devon, and every time they get close to each other, she has a heart murmur. Melanie can't forget Devon and has become obsessed. Marshall thinks she's going to do something silly when he discovers she's gone to the cemetery, but she is actually there to say goodbye to Devon, leaving the locket he gave her on his grave, and bringing us back to the beginning of the story. Melanie says goodbye to Marshall after they kiss, and he goes back to his life of watching weird stuff happen with Simon. This is an unusually delicate and sincere episode that doesn't have too many jokes or silliness, and it's a refreshing change of pace. While the story isn't exactly revolutionary, it appears to be intentional, a sort of junior version of the teenage death songs that became popular in the 50s and 60s, like Johnny Remember Me, Dead Man's Curve, or Leader of the Pack, as the two boys represent the clean-cut kid and the bad boy fighting over the girl, only for tragedy to strike one of them. It's given an original twist that could have easily stretched to a much longer story, but where the episode really succeeds is in how it deals with death and first love, and balances those two very different themes perfectly. The death is not too dark or heavy for kids, yet not at all frivolous or consequence-free. And the love is not mawkish or cheesy. The three child actors handle their performances incredibly well and carry the entire episodes by themselves. While the story itself is severely condensed to fit the 23-minute runtime, it manages not to feel rushed due to how it's paced. There are still a few Easter eggs in there, some for fun, such as the conversation with Elvis and the final scene of the Grim Reaper stalking the graveyard, and some which hint at the tragedy of the story, with the teacher being named Annabel Lee, in reference to the Edgar Allan Poe poem about the beautiful but tragic heroine of that story. It's a simple but memorable episode that is easily a 5 out of 5 for me. Thank you. Goodbye.